was a fake.
We ain't going nowhere.
We the OG Ledger Gang.
Ledger gang, ledger gang, ledger gang.
We stay rocking in the chain.
Blockchain,
Auto, crypto, be the main.
BTFD.
See the ledger swinging from my neck? Y'all already know what I rep. Stacking that crypto, we gaining no haters. There's really no flexing, be wet. Splash. I can go anywhere with it. Don't matter the number, there really no limit. Really no limit, there really no limit. Ooh, yeah, get it. Know that I get it. You know that I get it. Load the bit, pay, yeah, spend it. You know the private key is authentic. Know that I get it. You know that I get it. Load the bit, pay, yeah, spend it. You know the private key is authentic.
Y'all thought crypto was a fake.
We ain't going nowhere.
We the OG Ledger Gang.
Ledger gang, ledger gang, ledger gang.
We stay rocking in the chain.
Blockchain,
Auto, crypto, be the main.
BTFD. Man, crypto's a bubble. When it pops, you in trouble. What you gonna do when the government kick in the door and start taking it from you?
Man, crypto ain't a bubble, please. Tell me how they gonna get my private keys. The government can't keep an eye on me. I mean, you act like you don't want privacy.
Yeah, but what's a Bitcoin really? I mean, it seems so silly. So what you trying to tell me is banks are about to fall flat on their belly?
Yup, that's what I'm trying to explain. This is peer-to-peer, global exchange. In this world, banks ain't running the game. Border to border, blockchain, blockchain.
Tell me what you know about the blockchain. Gas limit set low octane. Taking down the banks, we are not playing. Bitcoin and fiat, we are not the same.
Y'all thought crypto was a fake.
We ain't going nowhere.
We the OG Ledger Gang.
Ledger gang, ledger gang, ledger gang.
We stay rocking in the chain.
Blockchain,
Auto, crypto, be the main.
BTFD.
Y'all thought crypto was a fake.
We ain't going nowhere.
We the OG Ledger Gang.
Ledger gang, ledger gang, ledger gang.
We stay rocking in the chain.
Blockchain,
Auto, crypto, be the main.
BTFD.
Welcome back to Reimagine 2020. I'm Yona Hockhauser, and today I'm glad to be joined by Kanan Linder, founder and CEO of Stardust. Kanan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Well, first off, you want to give our viewers a little background on who you are and how you got into blockchain technology?
Sure, will do. My name's Kanan. I actually grew up in the Bay Area, and entrepreneurship has always been in my background. In college, I actually did my senior thesis on blockchain, and as kind of an undergraduate, I was an indie game developer. Created games myself with a couple friends and published them online for people to play. After college, I was a software engineer at Bloomberg in New York City, and actually while I was there, we did a lot of blockchain stuff internally, talking with other employees, organizing events around blockchain. And I always wanted to bring blockchain to the gaming industry and figure out a way for players to play games based on this technology, but without having to know what the underlying blockchain technology was. And so that's why I built Stardust. We're the easiest API for any game developer to utilize blockchain technology.
Mm-hmm. And how do you guys accomplish that? I mean, people say blockchain and gaming, and I think it should be a good fit. And if you look at any technology, once gaming gets involved, that's where it gets the big push. I mean, if you look at graphic cards, I mean, are you kidding me? The evolution and push of graphic cards, CPUs, RAM, these have been greatly pushed forwards, and the higher limits have really been stretched out by gaming. Do you see something similar happening with blockchain, where if gaming does take off, it will push the technology forward?
Definitely. I think, in early 2013, 2014, other than drugs, gaming was the second biggest use case for Bitcoin.
Right.
And for that reason, I think when blockchain really hit its stride in 2017, 2018, people looked at blockchain applications in gaming first, even before DeFi. They said, wow, this is where early technology is absorbed specifically by players in a younger generation. And I think once gaming really clicks with that kind of demographic and blockchain gaming specifically, we'll kind of be able to spread blockchain prolifically after that, as kind of the younger generation will understand it, and then it will just be ubiquitous from there.
And when people first hear blockchain gaming, I know I did when I first heard blockchain gaming, I was a little bit confused. Like, is the game running? Is it being rendered on the blockchain? I mean, right now, that's not what happens. What does it mean, blockchain gaming today?
Sure. So we've gone in a couple different iterations. The first was CryptoKitties, where everything was completely on chain, breeding, changing colors, having different stats, etc. Everything tracked. Then people started realizing that blockchain, at least many blockchains out today, aren't made for the kind of hardcore graphical computation that is required by a GPU, and so the whole game cannot be running on chain. And so what we kind of subscribe to, and many people subscribe to, is where the game logic is kind of handled off chain, but many of the NFTs and the underlying assets are still on chain. So people still gain that things like truly unique items, complete asset ownership, being able to take your item out of the game and go trade it on an exchange. But yet many of the heavy lifting is still done by the game itself.
And so where does Stardust fit itself into this ecosystem?
Yeah, so we are, for want of a better term here, an asset management system for NFTs on chain. So if I'm a game developer and I'm creating a game, all I do is, instead of putting items in my database for my own players to never own, I can then author them on the blockchain and have an easy way for myself to interact with them, give them to players, take them from players, facilitate trades for players. But those players can still own the items completely in their blockchain wallet if they choose to.
And as a developer, do I kind of have to develop this into my game from day one, or is this kind of like an API? I can just plug it in. I have my non-blockchain game, just plug in this API, and I'm set. I now have a good blockchain game.
Second, so we took a game that had about, I think in the last month, it was between around 50K monthly actives. Completely centralized game, been running for about 3 years. And we took it and put in our API and migrated them to a blockchain-based system in under 2 hours. So that's really, from a completely live game, what we're doing in that respect. And from the game's perspective, they really like it because it's the same back-end design as technology they're already using.
And for the user, does it change their experience, or do they have to, create a wallet? Do they have to now deal, with the blockchain, even if they're just gamers that come in a game, or is it merely that the blockchain is doing the tracking, providing them, but on the user side, he doesn't even know he's interacting with the blockchain?
Correct. That's exactly what we're doing. The user doesn't need to sign up for a wallet, no exchange, no Ethereum, and we can get into kind of what blockchain we've used. No big transaction fees. What happens when you sign up for a game is it's almost like a Coinbase type experience. You sign up and you use a username and password. You don't know the blockchain is there. You're just there to play the game, in Coinbase's case, buy some Bitcoin, that's it. Now, if you learn kind of what blockchain is and understand kind of what a secondary marketplace is from there, you can then transition from that completely kind of managed state, as we call it, into a completely decentralized state. And so you as the user have the choice, and we basically give you a toggle and say, hey, you don't know what blockchain is, we'll toggle it off and you'll be managed for now. But in future, easily toggle it on and you gain complete control of your items.
Wow. So it essentially turns the game into kind of like the centralized custody service for them. If they want to, they can then actually turn that off, go into I understand mode, and actually hold their key.
100%. Yeah, we call it a little bit more of a managed service because custody has some regulations surrounding it. Managed is when you sign up for the game, you have your own public key that's generated for you that the game owner doesn't have the private key for, but you actually give the game owner permission to manage your public key. So from that perspective, they're just managing. You give them the equivalent of OAuth 2 app permissions, for example, same as your iPhone. But when you want to revoke that, it's as easy as saying revoke and pressing a button.
And then, so, if the end user doesn't know, especially at the beginning, doesn't understand he's interacting with the blockchain, what is the benefit here for the game developer? Why would they utilize the blockchain? Why not just keep it in an internal database like they have been doing for so long?
Yeah, so I'll kind of explain what I first started with, kind of my core ethos, and then where I got to after talking with actual customers. So the first thing was, oh, game developers want players to have true digital ownership, and they want unique NFTs they can mint on chain. Now, that's a great proposition for us who live in the blockchain world, but for a game developer who's only ever used a database, they don't really understand that language. It doesn't make them any more money. All they ask me is, how do I make more money from your system?
Right.
Now, the other kind of perspective here is blockchain allows people to move around disparate ecosystems. So there can be a marketplace over here, there can be a game over here, there can be something like Game Explorer over here, and even another service where professional players cryptographically sign digital items. Now, a game developer probably wants to tap into something like a revenue sharing secondary marketplace. And so we really come at the perspective to the game developer of, hey, we have an ecosystem of products we're building. Here's our API to tap into that. They want to do that. They understand how the marketplace, for example, makes them more money when players trade. And many of those benefits that are imbibed from the end user, such as true digital asset ownership and NFTs, et cetera, that comes along with it, but that's not the main sell for game developers unless they're using it as a marketing tool, which unfortunately at the moment, many people, especially younger, don't quite understand yet.
So they're actually seeing, it's actually an increase in revenue for them, for game developers to use this because it opens them up to a secondary market. You mentioned the Stardust Marketplace. Explain to me a little bit how that works.
Sure. So yeah, and to answer your question, right now the average game developer on us has seen about a 10 to 15% revenue increase month over month. The way it works from our perspective is right now the game developer, when you sign up for the game, you're in that managed state. And so you get to play the game and easily understand it. Now, what happens is if the game developer, and again, we don't necessarily take all the power away from the game developer. So the marketplace is kind of like an opt-in system for them. Right now, our marketplace generates a pair code, and all you have to do is provide that pair code to the game developer. And what that does is it actually links to a game account to the marketplace account. And therefore, on the marketplace, what you've done behind the scenes, and you still don't know you've done this, but you've made your marketplace account your actual decentralized wallet. Once you link a game to the marketplace, that marketplace becomes kind of your central decentralized wallet to which you can link every game on the Stardust platform to. So that's really how it works. We're kind of like a link-based system. In future, we'll probably have more white-labeled versions of our marketplace per game specifically. But as of right now, we use that marketplace as kind of like a central hub or central wallet store for you to be able to link every game to and become your true digitally asset-owned items.
And so essentially, if I'm a gamer and I have game A and game B, I could go to the marketplace and I can actually trade a project, an item from game A to game B, or is this more me and my friend both own the same game, the same two games, and we could swap items in between games?
So both actually. We use kind of cash or Ethereum or any other currency kind of as the medium of exchange. But the marketplace becomes somewhere you can see every game that you've played, see all the items across every game, see all the information across all of your items across all the different games, and trade item to item, item to currency across any game you wish on our platform.
And is there support yet by the developer? I mean, obviously, the developers have to support this. Is there support yet for inter-game items? For I buy a sword in game A, and then I could then trade it or ship it over to game B and use that same sword in game B?
So that's a little more of like what we'd call a multiverse concept, something we kind of see in the Ethereum world today, many people are trying to do. That is definitely supported by our system, but at the same time, to actually physically support that item and have it show up as a sword in game, that is something the second game developer would have to implement. So it's a little more of a business-to-business system or a business-to-business agreement, but at the same time, it's vanilla supported by our system.
And I'm sure that, especially if it's an item, a visual item in game, that'd be a little tougher sell because they'd have to render it in their game. It has to be the same design language, and that's probably more of a headache. But I could see it actually being easier to sell as a perk, as a boost, a stat boost, where they don't actually have to render it in game, but rather it would be running in the background, affecting their character stats or something. Do you foresee that being, an easier sell to developers to actually implement, this multiverse?
Yes. So I think the multiverse being different games runs with it a lot of what we would call, and I think bringing from DeFi would be gaming arbitrage, which is, if I want an item in game A that I'm playing, that's also supported in game B, and it's much easier to achieve in game B, maybe I'll go over and play game B. Now, that's an interesting perspective because game A is like, hang on, we want you to stay in our game. And game B is like, oh, we get more players. That's awesome for us. And so I do see it definitely being a push forward in terms of like gaming capabilities. But from kind of a business and a design sense and really coming down to like economic modeling, it really changes the kind of factors around that. And from there, it's a different economic model that we're going to have to explore. But I do think long-term it's beneficial.
Well, I mean, I think we can learn lessons from the cinematic multiverse. If you look at Marvel, they're not going to include, they have no incentive to include DC, or DC has no incentive to provide DC characters to the Marvel movies and vice versa, because they don't want to like you said, send their fans and their viewers to another platform. But there is the multiverse within the Marvel umbrella. So could you see the multiverse happening within a game developer? Look at the big game developers, Blizzard, Epic. I mean, you look at these big publishers and developers that have multiple games within their umbrella. Can you foresee that being the start of the multiverse where, blockchain technologies actually enables inter-item play within, under that one corporate umbrella, so they do have that economic incentive. They're not cannibalizing their own sales. Rather, they're incentivizing you to say, hey, I might not be willing to buy this item for this one game, which I know I'm going to beat in a week, I'll never touch again. But if I know I buy this one item in this game, and then now I could go bring it over to my other Blizzard game, do you foresee the developers being more on board for that?
100%, yeah. And we've seen kind of early, mostly with currencies like Robux and Roblox, you see kind of a global currency affecting everything in many different disparate games under the one umbrella. So we've already seen moves toward that. We haven't seen many items, at least personally I haven't, but we're already seeing that. And it's something people like. From a game developer's perspective, you're exactly right. It aligns completely with their model. Oh, I've played enough Fortnite, I'm gonna go play another Epic game. And then you can say, oh, I don't have to rebuy the $1,000 of skins. Of course, Epic may want you to, but that's again, an economic model that they can then be interested in, of course.
And can you tell me a little bit, I saw that you guys have Stardust Game Explorer. What is that exactly?
Sure. So as a block explorer shows you the data within all blocks on the blockchain, we have a little more of a game explorer that we see is a graphical representation of digital asset data. And unpacking that, what that means is it's an easy way for you to go type in an item, almost like a wiki page, see the item, see the stats, can more be created, what's the total supply, the price history. It's something that we're creating so game kind of developers and also players can really understand the kind of number data in a graphical format. It's a very easy way for them to also price items, which is very important.
Very cool. And you mentioned before when you were talking about Ethereum, and then you mentioned kind of what blockchain is being used now. Ethereum is congested, heavily congested because of DeFi, because of these extraordinary tools that are built upon it. Do you guys support many blockchains or a specific blockchain?
Yeah, so currently we're supporting a specific blockchain. We're actually in the kind of transition phase now, actually from Near Protocol to Solana. I can get into a little more about that, but we required a couple things from the underlying chain that we support. And first, I'll answer your question, why we only support one chain. And the reason is we work with game developers who don't know what blockchain is. They just want to tap into this ecosystem. And so giving them any sort of choice, hey, do you want to deploy to Ethereum or Near or Solana or Polkadot or Algorand or any of these just confuses the hell out of them. And we want to keep it in a way that just says one click, deploy, headache free. Now, from the kind of chain perspective, we needed cheap transactions, no question. Like 1/10 of a cent max. The reason for that is we generated over 1 million transactions last month. So obviously 2-cent fees up to $10 fees does not work for us. Two, because of that, we also imbibe that transaction cost for the end game developer. So they don't pay for anything on our system, at least not yet. And then the other thing we really needed out of one of these chains was kind of long-term transaction capacity, which we don't see from Ethereum today, and Ethereum 2.0 being very far off. And so that's something we kind of looked into these, what I would call next generation chains, in order to help us support.
And which chain did you guys move on to?
Solana is the one we're on right now. Yes.
Oh, very cool. And do you find that it does satisfy those requirements, and it could scale? You know, if you right now, you know, you get a bunch of big game developers to come on, will Solana be able to scale, or will it meet that same issue that Ethereum did, where it was a great blockchain, so many people went to use it, and then it couldn't scale?
Yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Solana turns about 50,000 transactions per second. So we're pretty confident in the way they designed it. And actually the main reason we looked into it at first was it's designed completely differently than any other chain, which gives it the ability to scale orders of magnitude larger than these other chains can. It also doesn't scale with sharding, which I know is a hot topic these days, but there are very big just composability issues with sharding when contracts live across different shards. And so for that perspective, we really liked Solana and what it brought to the table. And it's easily going to support, you know, tens of thousands of transactions per second. I'll say, like, as a general industry, we're very early. And I think DeFi is almost outgrowing what we have in the industry today so far, in terms of Ethereum's probably one of the best composable systems out there, but not for transactions per second. So because of that, we're really pushing it forward, and we're experiencing now, which is great, kind of the growing pains of being kind of a nascent industry, less than 5 to 10 years in the limelight here.
I mean, because you brought it up, I'll just ask you. You wrote an article. Why does sharding suck from a builder's perspective? Why? What does sharding do? Because many people, you know, as the scaling solution, why does it suck?
Yeah. So I'll preface everything, which is, as a programmer, code is flexible. And so there are ways to get around these issues, always. But it's an ease of use and headache. And if you can get around them in a way that's not code, like not building on a sharded system, then you can very easily not have to deal with the future headaches and technical debt that sharding will bring. One of the biggest things with sharding is, right now on Ethereum, everything lives on the same shard, for want of a better term. And so if I'm one smart contract calling another smart contract, I can assure myself that those are on the same shard, AKA, and that makes it very powerful in terms of transaction reversion. So I know I'm getting a little technical here, but what I mean by that is, we look at the train and the hotel example. If I'm booking a trip and I want to book a train, and then after I book that train, I want to book a hotel, then very easily on one shard, I can say, book me a train and book me a hotel. And if the train doesn't book, the hotel won't book. And if the hotel won't book, then the train will get reverted, so that I won't be left with a train and no hotel. Because obviously I don't want the train if I don't have a hotel. Now, when you're across shards, that's very hard to actually revert. And it doesn't revert actually without any help from the developer. And so right now, that reversion is all baked into Ethereum's core protocol. As soon as you get across shards, it's very possible that the train company lives on one shard and the hotel lives on another shard. And so the problem with that is, I could very easily say, book me the train and then book me the hotel. But because they're on different shards, there's no way for the train to know about the hotel or the hotel to know about the train. And so because of that, I could end up with a train and no hotel. And as a programmer, there are ways using like hash time locks within your contract to get around that and verify that everything is passed, or manually revert everything. But from an end developer perspective, that's very dangerous, because what happens if you book the train and then you book the hotel, and then the hotel fails and you need to revert the train, but at the same time, the train is a malicious actor and says, we don't want you to revert the train anymore. And so you can't, and you're stuck with the train ticket. That only happens in sharded systems. And when you're on one shard or like an Ethereum type system today, that can't happen. And so from a developer perspective, as you get into these very, very complex systems that are very widespread and people need to interact with other ecosystems, you have a lot of smart contracts, it can get kind of dangerous and annoying from a developer perspective. So because of that, we look for a system that didn't imbibe those problems, I would say.
So how has Solana succeeded in scaling so effectively and efficiently with fast transactions without reverting to sharding?
Yeah, great question. So they have a couple very cool optimizations. The first I'll talk about is something actually Ethereum wanted to, but I don't think ever implemented. Solana calls it kind of C-level parallel processing. But what that does is if I'm sending you a transaction and we have two other people sending a transaction to each other, our transactions actually don't need to be processed in series because we are mutually exclusive, right? Like what we do doesn't affect what they do. And because of that, they can actually process, based on the number of cores, those transactions in parallel. The other thing they do, which is very different than Ethereum, but is how they scale so effectively, or one of the reasons, is they use an account creation system that is much more like a Linux file system model. Which is very powerful when you look at how computing started. They work from a system that deals with every transaction, every account created in its different file, with its different metadata associated with it on a per contract level. And it actually is how the Linux file system works behind the scenes. And because of that, they're able to kind of store data and use that data so much more effectively than one of these EVM or WASM compatible systems right now.
And it's so interesting, getting your point of view, because you are a developer, you're a programmer, and so you kind of see under the hood of these various blockchains. Because as a crypto enthusiast, as a blockchain enthusiast, but without any technical knowledge myself, coding knowledge myself. So when I look at blockchains, I see it more conceptually. Ethereum has smart contracts. It has trouble scaling. But as a developer, as someone who actually needs these things, not just to make a transaction, but to actually build on it and make it work for yourself, for your customers, I'm sure you have a much better understanding of these blockchains under the hood. So as a developer, as a blockchain developer, when you look at the landscape of blockchains available today, and I'm sure it obviously depends on each use case, but right now, looking at it, do you think that there's a big disconnect between the overall cryptosphere sentiment on what blockchains are good and the developer understanding of, hey, this will actually work?
Yeah, 100%. And there are a couple things I'd attribute to that. Number one, and I've actually talked with a couple projects recently about this, we're in an interesting spot right now, having used Near Protocol and Solana, and are actually moving from one to the other because they're kind of the two very interesting chains that a lot of developers right now are looking for as they kind of scale from Ethereum. And so the fact that we've worked with both on a very personal level, it leads a lot of people to ask us, a lot of technical questions about that and what's better, what's worse. What I'll say is that the mainstream perspective is very skewed because number one, developers don't have the tools to try out every blockchain. The switching cost is just too great. Learning a new language, which sometimes you have to do, you just kind of have to make one choice and rip the Band-Aid right off. And you can investigate later, but investigating 3 or 4 blockchains at the same time doesn't really help. It doesn't work. And a lot of customers or products that just want to go to market are fine going to market on chains that don't scale because they have no market. And it's not worth thinking about that scaling before you actually have a customer base. And so I will say, yes, the general kind of viewpoint is very scaled to, indicators like, oh, what have VCs invested in? Where is the biggest project that I use on, right? Like which coin has gone up the most? But from that perspective and from a tech perspective, going behind the scenes, developers are really confused on what chains to use.
Wow.
A couple of us on Twitter just got in a Discord group the other day, and there are pros and cons to every chain out there. And so from that perspective, we're really early in the process, and I think the mainstream crypto view is very skewed, and don't get skewed by coin market cap when the real technology is still in its infancy.
I mean, because you come from a gaming world, so I'll ask this question through those lens. If you look at the PlayStation, the PS4, the Xbox One, and even PC the gaming, they have they have different processors. Some are more powerful than others. But for the and that affects the player's experience. Hey, I have a PlayStation. I like how the controller feels. I like how their PlayStation Network interface works. But for the developers, a big aspect is the developer tools. Each console has their own developer tools. It makes it easier or harder for developers to develop upon it. So similar with the blockchain, there are some blockchains that scale better. There are some blockchains that are more popular. There are some blockchains that have different use cases. But in terms of developer tools, which would you say right now is the blockchain that supports developers the most and makes it the easiest to develop on, regardless of that blockchain's capabilities?
Ethereum, no question. And as you said earlier, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Many of these tools are built by the community. Who has the biggest community? It's Ethereum. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And a lot of these chains have tried, but unfortunately kind of failed at attracting open source tooling on their network. And what has happened, it's actually very interesting because a lot of these open source tools are built on Ethereum. And the way these companies make money after building open source tools is by providing this as possibly a business-to-business service to other chains. And so there are there are services out there, like I won't mention, but that will sell you the ability to have a developer tool on your chain. And from that perspective, a lot of chains are, do we build this ourselves? Are we just going to end up spending a ton of money on this? Like, how do we jumpstart the community so that we don't need to be shilling out dollars or coins for everything that's built on our ecosystem? And so from that perspective, Ethereum today is unparalleled in the amount of tooling, the amount of support, and really what people don't, as a developer I have, but people don't realize is the number of like Stack Overflow questions or Stack Exchange questions for Ethereum. Like those are very helpful. If you have a question on Ethereum, 10,000 people have already tried to do that. Wow. But on these other chains and these nascent kind of ecosystems, I mean, we're left to ask that company for help, that is their foundation that is building the chain. And so from that perspective, it's a pain point that no one has yet solved because no one has, 1/10 of the active developers that Ethereum has right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're right. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy where, that's where the developers are, then the users, and then that's where the help is. But all in all, I mean, this is a really, really young technology. I mean, depending how you want to pick the start, 10, 11 years old for blockchain. And so when you go to game developers, that's essentially your clients. Do they understand kind of what you're offering them? I mean, obviously all they care about is, end of the day, am I going to make money? Is this revenue? But when you go and you introduce yourself, hi, I'm selling you blockchain abilities. Do they understand really what blockchain is? Is it still so new that they just immediately associate it with Bitcoin and Bitcoin with Silk Road and Silk Road with drugs? Or because, they're developers, they're probably a little bit more tech savvy and a little more in the know, they have an understanding of blockchain. You just have to sell them on how it helps them.
Yeah, good question. And so there are two main camps. There are the people who understand blockchain and its benefits. And then there are people that consider blockchain scams because they, bought into some ICO, BitConnect, whatever it was. And from that perspective, I don't know, honestly, many of the times who I'm approaching. And so my pitch actually doesn't really include the word blockchain. The one time it comes up, and a lot of the time it's almost the first, second, or third question that is asked of me is, what happens if you go out of business? Where does my data go? Like, are you going to lose my data? And I'm happy to say, no, we're using a decentralized technology in order to make sure there are, redundancy in your data and that it can't be lost even if we go out of business. Now, some people pick up on that and say, oh, like blockchain? And then I'm like, yeah, what do you know about it, right? Kind of opening up the floor to them from that perspective. But I don't lead with it because when I tried, I was getting a lot of no's, not because of me or our product, but mostly because people just were turned away by the technology and also the barrier to entry that is associated with it. Like blockchain, oh, I'm going to have it's going to take me a month to learn. Oh, well, my players are going to leave because they're going to have to download wallets. And so we really want to show oh, we're just a normal system. Oh, there's blockchain in the back that's powering this. Oh, that's awesome. So it's kind of our kind of, second cell, if you will, that really we have kind of a new generation of technology powering our system.
Well, I think that's really interesting, it's we're currently at the point where it does that, where just merely mentioning the word blockchain will cannibalize your sale, will cannibalize your pitch. And that definitely does not, I think it's very unfair. I understand why, but I find it very unfair because, like me and you, we understand the technology. We understand that that's not due to any real limitations of the technology, but rather more of a kind of a PR issue, if you will. So, do you think that will solve itself, that just, enough, it will become adopted enough, the technology will mature itself enough, and enough game developers will implement it that it will not become taboo anymore? Or do you think that the blockchain community really needs to put more effort into PR to really get the push off?
So it's an interesting question because blockchain and PR is kind of a negative connotation and it's just a bunch of shilly projects, telling me why they're the best. From that perspective, though, I always liken it to databases. We don't hear the term database games at all, right? But we hear blockchain games a ton, right? Why do we hear that? Because right now, blockchain games are classified as a separate classification of games. And what we're obviously trying to do is show you don't need a wallet or barrier to entry to play a blockchain-based game. They're just games. And at the end of the day, I think blockchain will end up being the standard that everything is built on. But at the same time, it won't kind of be called out as the standard. And I think to get there, more people, Stardust in gaming, but hopefully some other companies in other sectors will also bring blockchain technology in a layman's perspective to their end customer. And once that is done, I think that blockchain technology will catch on. And it won't be so much blockchain technology catching on as, oh, I'm just building, storing my games or data on the chain, right? And that's kind of that is, simple a statement as, oh, I'm storing my game's data in a database. It won't be this oh my God, you're using blockchain, time to go, raise 8 figures type thing.
Yeah.
And I think once we get to that point and it's less sensationalized than maybe it is now that you're using blockchain, that it really just becomes, it becomes a business decision and a mainstream way to gain adoption for your game. I don't. And so I guess to one sentence answer your question, I think we don't really need PR. I think what we just need is more adoption. And with more adoption kind of comes that normality that, oh, I'm using blockchain for my game. Cool.
Yeah, I think you make a great point where it essentially is, a way of storing data. It's a database, but it's a decentralized database. It's a distributed ledger technology. That's DLT. And so that kind of changes it up a bit, because if you look at, if you were offering a service to a game developer that was hardware, that was a physical solution, they needed fans for their servers or whatever, it would be tough to kind of take that solution and implement it in a different use case. But because you are creating a solution that stores data in a unique way, do you foresee that, Stardust's solution could be implemented not just in gaming, but you could kind of, write it, change it, or even apply it directly to another industry as well?
Yes. So I think from that perspective, and a lot of what we would call primitives in blockchain are very similar. At the end of the day, Stardust is an easy API to use, a way to put some data that you have onto the chain. And that data is very agnostic, meaning you can format that data in any way you want. We as a business have chosen to go into the gaming vertical and really built our products to serve that gaming vertical. But if you really look at just an easy API to put data on chain, that applies to many industries, art, right? Any sort of digital good that you want to create a storefront for. And so from that, music, anything. So right now we're focused on gaming, and I think that's super important from a business sense. Blockchain aside, business sense, you need kind of gaming as our vertical. Within it, we have our beachhead market of indie-based games. You really have to push forward. But yes, our technology that we're building is very agnostic in the sense that if I want to put some digital data on chain, our API is a great way to go about it. And so in future, maybe 3 to 5 years down the line, we'll definitely look into some of those other kind of verticals.
Well, I'm telling you already, I'm willing to sell my data for that battle axe that's available in that game. So definitely something to look into. But right now, how many games are currently utilizing Stardust?
So we have 6 games currently. We're currently going through what we would call probably Stardust V2. That will actually take our probably max player count that we can handle per game into the hopefully million player range, which is really our next step for us. As we do that, we are onboarding more customers, and as I said, our average integration time is about 1 to 2 hours.
Wow.
So because of that, it's very easy for us to acquire more customers, and really because of that, it's hampered almost how quickly we can onboard people, because you have normal blockchain technology, which takes a month to onboard. And so many companies you see start onboarding people because by the time they're going to finish, their product's going to be ready. And so what we're doing right now is we're actually building out our developer dashboard, which is going to be the one-stop shop for any game developer to see all the data about their game, their daily active players, the players within their game, be able to manage their players if they need to, tap into a marketplace, sell items, etc. And that product is coming probably by the end of September, and it's going to be our real main, I think, V2 launch that we're going to offer to all the developers we have on our waiting list currently.
And I think that you are right, perfect time, perfect place. Because right now, in the past couple of years, we've seen a major shift in the business model of games, where it went from pay $60 up front for a CD, and that's it, and that's all the developers going to get, to this shift because of the success of battle royales, of free-to-play battle royales like Fortnite and PUBG and many others, where you see this shift now where it's in-game transactions. It's microtransactions, in-game transactions, freemium gaming, where that's the target, that's the market you guys are going for, where you're managing those in-game purchases. Does what you do work exclusively in that model where developers want to track the in-game purchase items, or could it also work in a traditional game where they're not paying for the items, but just developers want to track what items users have?
100%. So we call it, at our base, we're an asset management system for game assets. And so a game developer, regardless of how they are, whether they're the freemium model, which is what we call that microtransaction model, or the $60 upfront model, our system works great for either. Now, I think it works a little better right now for that freemium model. But that being said, we are in an interesting point where iPhone apps, the majority of them, I think almost all of them now in the gaming sense, are free. And so that's definitely something that we see in our model being helped, right? We want to make them more revenue per sale of item in their game. But at our core, we're a place for them to create items and manage those items, the dashboard for developers. And something also interesting to mention is keep an eye on how, I know Epic, right, with Fortnite has, is pennies compared to Apple, right? But there's a huge court battle going on right now over the basically monopoly Apple has in its iOS payment system within apps, taking 30%. Google not far behind. And I'm kind of sitting here saying, wow, this could be a huge opportunity for any kind of embeddable payment system within apps if Apple does lose. I don't think it's going to happen very soon. But I think so far as looking at blockchain technology and how it applies to games, and specifically tracking in-game purchases, if that was ever able to be applied to mobile, in conjunction with Apple's system, that could be huge for this industry and really turn the whole blockchain gaming industry from zero to hero very quickly, as we've kind of seen with DeFi, earlier this year.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's the dream, is to get from that zero to hero. But right now, because of a number of reasons, including that technology being so new, it's still being developed. I mean, you're at the forefront of your field, and it's still so fresh. And also, on top of that, like you mentioned, when you're going to developers, you don't even mention the word blockchain because of that bad connotation. But let's take a hypothetical for a second. What does that hero look like? Let's say that hypothetically, you get Ubisoft, EA Games, and Epic Games in a room. They all agree, we want to do this. We want to go together. Stardust, we're giving you an unlimited budget. You have 5 years to work on it. And essentially, what does that dream marriage of blockchain and gaming look like for the gamer if you didn't have to worry about budget, if you didn't have to worry about buy-in from the developers, if they all got together? What does that dream blockchain gaming look like?
Yeah, great question. And I think there are many ways that could go. And I think one of the things you mentioned earlier, so far as the multiverse, is very prevalent in that system. Right now as a game developer, you have so much, as a gamer, you have so much sunk cost. You sink 1,000 hours into FIFA, and when you go start playing in Fortnite, you are you spent zero time. And yeah, you'll have to learn the game. You'll always have to learn the game. But if there was some way to transfer all that sunk cost from one game to another, or all that sunk money, right, or sunk time, whatever you want to call it, from one game to another, I think that's really how we need to design these systems. And so, as you said, kind of the multiverse ecosystem becomes one and the same, right? I am playing a game as part of a larger multiverse instead of just as a single game. Now, those are kind of, from that perspective, that is a huge change to the developer model, right? And I think that is less of a, business, that is a business decision. And so that's why we think it's really going to start with the indie game developers, the longer tail solution. But one thing I'll mention for the indie game developers, which is, I think, very interesting, especially if they had those big guys in the room, and something you talked about in the movie industry, is IP. These characters right now only exist in one game. And I think one of the other things that's huge in this multiverse concept for developers, not players, is developers can have ways to license IP from people like, Niantic or Nintendo, right, with Pokemon, that they couldn't have before. And so, for example, I want to build a game. It's got 100,000 players. I'm 2 people. And I could never get a Pokemon license. But if that license is built on chain, I can then license that IP per player cost. So I can pay, 1/10 of a penny per player to have Pikachu in my game or something like that. And so I think from many different levels, right? The multiverse for the big guys, code IP, or IP licensing for the smaller developers, the players having the ability to not sink a ton of cost into one game and then not want to play a second game because of it. I think all of that kind of together is where this next stage, like the hero phase, should you say. It's hard because these are all disparate things that you need everybody together to agree on. And it's why blockchain technology, unfortunately, catching on is going to maybe take another 5 years to be huge in this space. But, it's moving in the right direction, and all it takes is time, and this will happen.
Well, I'm very excited to see that happen. And I appreciate the work that you're doing to push it forward, Kenan. Thanks for joining us. And I can't wait for the next 5 years brings for blockchain and gaming, and hopefully we get that multiverse as well. Thanks for taking the time. And for all of our viewers at home for Reimagine 2020, I'm Yona Hockhauser. Thanks for watching.
Reimagine 2020 is brought to you by Pump and Dump, a scheme for a manipulative increase in the cryptocurrency market followed by a collapse. An attempt to increase the cost with the help of false, based on nothing based recommendations.
Tron, a new world. What does a virtual civilization of the future look like? It is decentralized, independent, self-governed, equal, cooperative. It has high performance. The Tron ecosystem wins at speed. Each Tron data unit can evolve and become part of the ecosystem. It is democratic. Every member of the Tron community can vote for their leader of choice to govern the ecosystem. Global developers around the world create outstanding apps every day, building a virtual world. The moment we've been waiting for is finally here. The future is now. Tron, decentralize the web.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Fauci Nakamoto. We all know accidents happen. For example, you might have accidentally forgotten to convert all of your directly deposited fiat into cryptocurrency. And that's okay. I'm reminding you that when all else fails, there's always Plan B for Bitcoin.
Hey, who's that? Mo Crypto.
Yo, Mo Crypto, what
Yo,
up?
what's up, man?
What's up? Kryptonite, Jess, have you guys seen CoinMarketCap today? CoinMarketCap, all in the red, double digits.
What? That's bad, right? That means we're losing money.
No, it's good, man. That means everybody's losing money. You got to buy that dip.
Everyone knows you buy the dip, 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 dip.
Legend gang, gang, gang. Coin bros, we gon' buy that dip. Dipping.
I buy the coin on that low. Ain't worried about no FOMO. Coin market cap out to crash on my lap when the bitch bounce back like a pogo. No fiat dough, I got Divi coin. I got Bitcoin, I got Ether. What y'all know about a pump and dump? John McAfee all on my tweeter. In the office with a 2-liter. By ATH, that must be a joke. Wife keep asking if we are broke. She don't know, I got a master no. Even my son told me buy the dip. Ain't talking about what you put on potato chips. Even my son told me buy the dip. Ain't talking about what you put on potato chips. I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the motherfucking dip. BTFD, you gon' buy the 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 dip. I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the motherfucking dip. BTFD, you gon' buy the 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 dip. Legend gang, buy the dips, get the gains. Y'all complain, but you dumb motherfuckers should do the same. Crypto, stacking up, private keys, I back 'em up. MacBook, fast as fuck, lock the door, the girl's acting up. I buy the dip when I'm sleeping, I buy the dip when I'm jogging. I buy the dip when I'm buying dip, I buy the dip in my coffin. That's Coin Bros on YouTube, buy the rumors, sell the news. For this crypto, I'm selling shoes on Craigslist, I got shit to move. I buy the dip, dipping, I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the motherfucking dip. BTFD, you gon' buy the 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 dip. I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the dip, dipping. I buy the motherfucking dip. BTFD, you gon' buy the 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 dip. Buy the dip, dipping. 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 BTFD gon' buy the dip. 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 What?
Hi, it's Miss Crypto Cleo here, your favorite futures telling psychic. Are you unsure whether to go long, short, or market buy? Not sure which of your altcoins is going to move next? No problem. Call me at 1-800-555-MOON and Miss Crypto Cleo will tell your futures. Oh, here we have a caller now. Hello, it's Miss Crypto Cleo. How can I tell your future?
Hi, Miss Crypto Cleo. First off, I just want to say that I really love your show, and I want to know, is XRP going to 589? Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Reimagine 2020. I'm Arthur, one of your hosts here, and today we have with us a great lineup of DeFi builders. And what makes this particularly interesting is that this is technically the follow-up to our May panel, which honestly by now it feels like forever ago. So excited to hear about everyone's progress, and as last time as well, discuss generally about all things DeFi. So maybe we just kick it off for those of you who don't know too much yet about DeFi. Maybe everyone we go around and everyone introduces themselves and their project. So should we start from Long from Ren?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Long. I'm the CTO of the Ren project. And at the Ren project, what we're building is a trustless and decentralized bridge between as many blockchains as we can. And for the last 3 months, we've been focusing a lot on Bitcoin, on Ethereum. Yeah, over the next coming months, we'll be connecting all sorts of other chains together as well.
All right, Dennis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dennis. I'm the head of ecosystem growth at Kyber Network. And Kyber Network is one of the largest liquidity protocols on Ethereum right now. And it basically brings suppliers with demand, with the buy side and the sell side, and the demand comes from multiple different sources like Uniswap, Bancor, or 40, 50 different reserve managers. And we push this downstream to multiple dApps and DeFi projects and wallets and all sorts of projects that require liquidity downstream. And lately we launched the Kyber DAO a few months ago, where we put governance and decisions of the protocol on there. And that's pretty much us in a nutshell.
Awesome. And I'm lost, but I'm JPM, one of the researchers for ThorChain, not part of the official team. I'll just help out. But I can speak to what ThorChain is trying to build and the technical solution. ThorChain has just launched ChaosNet this week and is onboarding the first of the 30 nodes that will run ChaosNet, which is basically hooking up a Uniswap-like protocol to Binance Chain. But ThorChain is unique in that it's chain agnostic, so it can be connected to Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the team are going to work on the Bitcoin, Ethereum connections, which are probably about 90% built out, but they just need to be well tested, probably going to Q3, Q4. But you can call ThorChain a cross-chain Uniswap. That's chain agnostic and asset neutral.
All right, awesome. And I think, so since last time we spoke, Ren was still in ChaosNet. Since then, you guys have obviously launched the mainnet, and it's really started picking up, right? What do you think, Long? What's been kind of like the determinant and for all this?
Well, I mean, I think very naturally there is a big demand for Bitcoin on Ethereum. I think the growth of WBTC prior to our mainnet launch kind of showed that. And that really picked up when WBTC was added to MakerDAO as a available collateral. I think when we launched, we were sort of serendipitous in our timing, and we launched right onto the back of, I guess, this sort of yield farming craze and the beginning of that. And so I think a lot of the demand for Ren BTC on Ethereum has just been the demand for people to access a way to generate yield. on their Bitcoin in ways that they just couldn't before. Previously Bitcoin was kind of not tapped into the DeFi ecosystem, and so all these opportunities for generating yield weren't available. We made that available, and then with I think at the same time, just a lot of attention was drawn to the fact that you could generate pretty outrageous returns for certain moments there using various DeFi protocols. And I think at the very beginning, it was actually interestingly enough, just about getting your hands on WBTC, but just in an easier way. WBTC is very difficult to wrap and unwrap. Most users actually can't do it manually, or they can't do it themselves. And so just the ability to do it through RenBTC and a curve stable pool between RenBTC and WBTC made accessing that a lot easier. But now we are seeing people, putting BTC on Ethereum just to have RenBTC for its own purposes.
And just for reference, what is the I guess the TVL is the best metric we got, right? Like where are you at as of today?
So we're at 100 million. I don't think that's actually the best metric though for a lot of these cross-chain protocols. I think a better metric is actually volume, because I think in most cases, total value locked doesn't really capture necessarily everything that's happening. So our total volume is just under 350 million or around that mark. So we're seeing, about
this
3
is
to 4.
What you basically minted and what's been minted.
That's right. Yeah.
And,
sometimes it goes across, and sometimes it kind of comes back. So really, the utility of a protocol, you could do $1 billion in volume, but have zero total value locked. So it's not necessarily a great metric to just look at the one.
Got it. And I guess, and you guys have already started working on essentially the next additions to the bridges, right? Which I understand that Polkadot is next.
Yeah, so we have a whole series of chains that should come out in the next release. So we're doing sort of the next major release for RenVM, and with it will come a whole set of chains, and one of those is Polkadot, specifically Akawa. And
I understand that so you've kind of chosen Polkadot instead of Cosmos. Was there to add to the multi-chain API? Is there any technical limitation, or what was the kind of decision-making process behind there?
We actually do have Cosmos in our multi-chain API.
My bad.
Through the Terra chain, the Luna token, those guys opened a pull request and added their implementation in. So that's there, and will very likely be in this next release as well.
Awesome. I guess let's give the mic to Dennis from Kyber. I think most notably, what you guys have done since then is the launch of the Kyber DAO, which so you guys have almost a third of the token supply is being actively staked. You've given kind of control of the protocol to in some parts to the community. How has that been so far?
I think it's surpassed our expectations, because we can see participation rates in other decentralized governance models, like other popular ones, or some like Maker, for example, and participation can be low. The number of voters sometimes per whatever vote they have can be like 20, 30, which is below what we would expect of something that's widely used. Whereas on Kyber, I think in the first epoch, we had 2,500 people vote, which to us is tremendous participation rate. And I think, it's also down to the fact that we're capturing fundamental value, in the sense that many of these new yield farming and all that stuff that we're seeing, people are getting a governance token, which we're not sure what value it has, whereas the rewards you get from participating in the Kyber DAO are directly ETH. So each KNC is accruing hard ETH, so it's much easier to value. You can say, oh, look, that's how much ETH is. Today, ETH market is this much. Whereas on other competitors, it can be a bit more abstract. How much is a Wi-Fi whatever governance token worth? It's so speculative, and I think that's something that makes us stand out a bit from the current yield farming narrative and the decentralized governance narrative.
But I guess one of the sides where you guys, it really has been the sort of, I guess, the year of the AMMs and sort of DEXs, right? But Kyber, you guys are not necessarily an AMM sort of pool, or I understand that there was some initiative, or you guys were looking at that. Are you kind of what's your thought process there today?
Well, the way we're actually structured is we're open to every single type of market making mechanism. So we have order book types connected to Kyber. We also have multiple AMMs. Uniswap is connected. That's the beauty of the Kyber structure. So we do have multiple AMMs for reserve teams who want to provide liquidity. It's so much easier just to deploy an AMM on Kyber or Uniswap and then to Kyber rather than do it manually. So we're pretty involved with that aspect as well.
I mean, Uniswap's been like all kind of, I guess, gotten everyone's attention in the last 3 months, and it seems to be this sort of unofficial launch pad of where sort of anything and everything goes, right? Kyber is you guys are kind of like a curated, essentially like a curated kind of DEX, right? That the tokens that are available on Kyber need to be pre-approved, right? So that it gives the customers a sort of some level of security, right? Are you guys also looking at sort of launchpad type of stuff, or?
I mean, not necessarily launchpad, but maybe just more open. Anyone can come and provide liquidity. So if a team wants to provide liquidity and call it a offering or whatever, it's up to them. The protocol really doesn't care what happens on the front end or how you present it. So we do have some ideas. Maybe we'll announce, I don't know when we're going to announce it, or we're still in talks, maybe having it a bit more open, a bit more similar to Uniswap rather than having it purely curated, because there are now like different TCR methods where you can actually verify a token, whether it's a scam or not, using some decentralized method. There's a few different options out there that we're looking into.
That sounds interesting. I mean, looking forward to hear more. JP, I think since we last spoke, Thorchain has entered heavily into testnet mode, and I think testnet 5 was the last one, and now, as you mentioned, ChaosNet.
Yeah, that's correct. So about 2 months ago, the team started their public testnets, which include being able to have public nodes join and leave the system. Thorchain is unique in that it has a very high churn rate of its nodes. So it every 3 days, it will onboard a new node, the node with the highest bond or potential bond, and then churn out an old node because it seeks to avoid capture wherever possible. And high churn rates in this validator set is one of the mechanisms for being resistant to capture. The other reason is because Thorchain uses generic Goldfetter threshold signature scheme, which is a synchronous and a live procedure. So you can't have nodes with old keys that will stagnate. So by churning the nodes regularly, you ensure that the keys stay alive all the time because it's a MPC protocol. Ren actually used something quite different, which I'm very keen to get my hands on and check out how it works once it's open source. I've been bugging Ty almost weekly for that, but it's such
sometime this week.
Awesome. Ren team have built something pretty special, and if it works, clearly it does work. So I'm very excited to see how it works, because it basically means that as an aside, better can go to thousands of participants rather than have a small signing set. Anyway, so Thorchain is in its testnets, and the team just wanted to see that the churning procedure was validated, that the chain could upgrade. So Thorchain's got a unique ability that as soon as the nodes run a new version, the whole chain upgrades. No halt is required. And the team pulled off 8 upgrades within a week, just upgrade. Everything from migrating vault funds, changing the KV store, changing the business logic, changing the bridges. But the team kind of fleshed out and proved that the entire system can upgrade as it goes. And there's no kind of like lock-ins. As long as the nodes all opt in to run the new software, then it'll run. So that was a big thing, and it's all been tested. So yeah, this week the team are onboarding these new nodes, but this time around it's real money, real funds on Binance Chain. And the team are probably aiming for $50,000 to $100,000 cap, and then slowly increase it through the millions once everyone's happy. The team don't run any nodes as well. It's all publicly run nodes.
And how many nodes did you guys get to in the last testnet?
So testnet hit 4.2, hit 27 nodes. It's mainly, but it's tapping out at 30 nodes, which is the design criteria for this particular testnet. In order to get higher to 90, 99 nodes, the team have to build out a bit more of an infrastructure to handle large sizes like that. one of that is to shard the vaults. But yeah, so the current testnet is 15 nodes, and the team will launch the chaosnet publicly when they hit around 15 nodes, 12 to 15 nodes.
Awesome. I mean, super exciting. And but I understand the current for the sales pitch is the cross-chain Uniswap, right? The first chaosnet will be using essentially the TSS and the kind of the technology infrastructure you guys have built. But at first, it'll only be Binance Chain, correct?
That's correct.
And when can we expect the? I think the thing that the community is most expecting is the Bitcoin and Ethereum chaos nets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bitcoin and Ethereum, like I said, 90% of the infrastructure is being built out, but it just needs more of it needs to be tested. The interface with the wallets need to be tested. So Bitcoin, the infrastructure uses the op return data in order to broadcast transaction intent back to ThorChain. And for Ethereum, there's a vault contract where events are registered when a new person deposits tokens, and that event fires off and gets into ThorChain. So some of the infrastructure still needs to be finalized, but it's pretty close. Yeah, we believe we can hit multi-chain chaosnet later this year.
Awesome. I mean, this year I think has definitely been something, everyone's been finally the momentum that everyone's been kind of waiting for. Let's dive into another kind of, aside from DeFi, another more and more trending word or term has been DAOs. And I think, so as we mentioned, Kyber recently launched theirs. What is your guys' opinion on DAOs? And because I think to you, Long, there is also a plan to launch a Ren DAO, I understand. Maybe we can kick it off, and you can share your kind of view and opinion on DAOs, as well as what's Ren's plans around.
I mean, I think it's a DAO is changing and evolving in exactly what it means, but generally it's some kind of tokenized driven governance model. I think they're inevitable in any serious decentralized protocol, unless the protocol can function so simply that it doesn't need a DAO. You could maybe argue that Uniswap is probably one of the simplest systems out there, but even that has some parameters that you might want to control. For example, the fee, just simply, or even perhaps the precise curve that's being used. And so immediately you need some kind of way to control how people vote. And how people make decisions. And I think one of the biggest challenges was something that Dennis touched on, which is how do you increase participation, and how do you incentivize participation, and how do you get away from freeloaders? Ren is kind of a complex system in that sense, because a vote that you make on chain, let's say on Ethereum, may not actually necessarily hold, because at the end of the day, the functionality of the system is in the nodes as our separate network that sort of watches what happens, and they could just decide to not or to ignore the vote. So there's a requirement to understand which parts of the system can be governed by a vote on chain, and which parts of the system can only kind of be signaled with voting on chain, where nodes might use the chain and use their ability to vote as a way to signal to each other which upgrades they're happy with, or what kind of path or what kind of direction they want to go with. But at the end of the day, they may not actually go in that direction, and it can be very difficult to prove whether or not someone has actually done the thing they were going to say on one chain versus another, especially when you've got an MPC protocol involved. We do anticipate opening to a DAO. We haven't quite seen a model that we're super stoked about yet. They all seem to have some various issues, but I think we're getting closer to seeing some that have been working. I think more recently we've seen how the right kind of incentives can at least encourage participation. We love the idea of creating governance tokens, or distributing governance tokens through people that use the system or actively contribute to it doing the thing that it's meant to do. Recently with the launch of Comp, you generate that by borrowing and lending. Obviously, I personally think that the way that was implemented was a little bit gameable, and doesn't necessarily capture people who earnestly want to borrow and lend for the sake of borrowing and lending, which is ideally the people that you would capture. So I think there's still a lot to be figured out there.
What's your favorite kind of DAO personally, I guess, or is it Comp, as you mentioned, Compound?
I I do quite like Compound. I think the thing that I like about it is the directness of the governance system. So, I mean, it was the first one to really explode, and it kind of, I guess, drew a lot of attention to yield farming. But it was also one of the biggest protocols to take a step from being centralized to being fully decentralized in essentially one big move. And I think they did a decent job of it. And I think there's very little, if anything, in their protocol, maybe the UI that is now left to the central team. And I think that's kudos to them for being able to achieve that.
I mean, I think these are all, amazing experiments that are being had and sort of that are being made, and over time we will sort of, everything's being figured out. And I think it's what's crazy about the crypto space is just the speed that it goes at. JP, what's your sorry, go on.
Oh no, you guys go.
All right, I was just saying, JP, what's your kind of view on DAOs?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Long that we yet to see a really good DAO. So I don't believe in just locking up an asset and not having it at risk anywhere and just, stabbing at it in the dark on these decisions. I think that kind of DAO is just pointless. The best kind of DAOs force the participants to put the capital at risk. I'll explain why and how. But two, they are actively rewarded directly and indirectly, directly as in incentives and indirectly as in future success of the protocol for the participation. So at-risk governance is not just locking up your tokens in a smart contract and doing a vote once a month. At-risk governance is an example, staking an asset alongside capital in a liquidity pool. And instead of locking up that asset, you lock up the liquidity tokens of the asset. And then those liquidity tokens represent your proxy of your voting power. Additionally, you can also then have block by block time-weighted influence, so to prevent whale attacks. But more importantly, because the capital is at risk in the pools, it one allows any other whale or other to be bought out by the community because the voting power is in its liquidity tokens reference to the staked assets in the pool. So at-risk governance. So the decision-making by the DAO members is then immediately felt throughout the system, because if they don't make the right decisions with the right fees, the right incentives, as Long was saying, it's all about tweaking all the levers that a certain protocol can have, such as fees and whatnot, and gauges for curve or whatever. If they don't make the correct decisions, then it immediately affects the capital that they've locked up in the pools because it's at risk. So that's really important. The second thing is, which Long touched on, is that you can't just broad brush every decision thrown towards the DAO in the same kind of voting structure. So as an example, there's two types of participants who are putting the capital at risk in ThorChain. One are nodes who are bonding, and the bonded capital is underwriting all the staked capital. The nodes run critical software, which produces blocks and decides on the business logic for swapping and staking. So the kind of decisions that nodes should be able to make got nothing to do with the stakers. They're worried about the security and the longevity of the protocol. So by being a Cosmos-based proof of bond blockchain, the nodes form their own DAO, but their decision making is opt-in and running software rather than poking at things in a smart contract. Whereas the stakers have very autonomous influence on the system. Their influence literally comes down to what assets are listed and delisted, and that's really it. Any pool with deep assets will get listed. Any pool with shallow assets will get delisted by the system. So you got to separate out your user members and give them, and obviously at all times have minimal governance. ThorChain team believe in as minimal as possible governance as possible. If it can be codified, then codify it. If it can be in a pendulum or equilibrium and codify that, like an incentive pendulum or an equilibrium between staking and bonding or security ratios, then codify it. Don't let that ambiguity be interpreted by the meat space and have constant governance month in, month out. Codify that thing, make that thing block by block. So that's the team's thoughts on governance and how to do it properly and how to do it incorrectly. And today I don't yet see any DAO which I would want to participate in, which has the correct structure that I've just spoken about. There is one or two DAOs bubbling up right now that pursue this structure, I think they will do well.
I think Aave is one which is looking at it like this, where capital does actually get put at risk.
Yeah, at-risk governance is very important.
And you mentioned another thing which I've been meaning to ask is, so these like liquidity provider tokens, they become very, very popular and useful. Actually, the kind of use cases of them are becoming kind of more and more elaborate. Does Thorchain also have plans to incorporate such feature?
Yeah, liquidity tokens are interesting because they represent they don't represent directly assets. They represent the share of a financial instrument. That financial instrument is a pool, and they own a share of that pool. That pool has underlying exposure to two or more assets. So like a Uniswap pool or a Thorchain pool. So the liquidity token is a lot more value stable because if it's two assets, one goes up, one goes down, but the mean is the liquidity token. You need both tokens to go up or down in value for the liquidity token redemption value to change. So liquidity tokens are inherently more value more stable in value than the underlying assets. And two, they are yield generating. So if the pool creates volume and fees, then those liquidity tokens have a earnable right on the earnings of the pool. So a yield generating. So these are very interesting things. And I think not only will they be used more in lending and collateral. So rather than collateralizing debt with illiquid assets, collateralize debt with liquidity tokens, because that debt is now yield generating and can be instantly liquidated through the pool by just unstaking in one direction. So very, very, very powerful assets. The Thorchain is cross-chain. We believe that the future of, I guess, interoperability across chain is going to be something through IBC, inter-blockchain communication. And it's quite simple. So you can stake your assets in liquidity pools on Thorchain, get minted liquidity tokens that represent your redemption right on that pool, and then use IBC and wire it to another chain like Aragon or Kava. And for those tokens, then do other cool things on those chains. So interoperability, composability at the IBC layer is something that is a design space we're only beginning to scratch. And Ren's chain is also perhaps IBC compatible, so there could be something there in the future.
Exciting. And Dennis, you're the only one here with the DAO, and I guess this is leading to my next question. The first vote on proposals that you guys had at Kyber or at Kyber DAO was during an Ethereum congestion period, which is now kind of I mean, this is kind of this mosquito bites across every project's sort of life right now. But how have you guys kind of approached this? Voting becoming more and more expensive, and what's your thought process there?
Well, when we were initially designing this whole DAO back in December, when we started, the Ethereum, the fees wasn't such an issue, and we never really anticipated it would become that crazy. Yet back then we did take some key decisions that are paying off today, and that was something very simple: just allowing any voter to delegate their vote to any other address. And we thought, okay, we'll create an ecosystem of pool masters, of different flavors of pool masters, to kind of be attractive for institutional investors, for end users, for the community, for any kind. So if you're part of the Kyber Telegram group community and you're passionate about that, there is a community pool master that you can delegate your vote to. Once you delegate it, you don't have to vote every 2 weeks. You can voice your opinion through Telegram, Twitter, and that kind of builds consensus around that pool master, and it votes based on what that kind of stakeholder group wants to vote on. So then you don't have to pay the $10 or whatever fees every epoch, every 2 weeks to vote. It's basically cheaper system. It's more like representative democracy, and that's how kind of we're getting around that issue. If you're holding tens of thousands of KNC, and the reward you get is much more than the fees, then this isn't really an issue to you. But if it is an issue, you do have 6-7 different options out there.
Got it. And I mean, it's always great to see when there's a simple solution to a kind of difficult problem. But how has this sort of state of Ethereum, I guess, or state of gas impacted Kyber as Kyber generally?
I mean, it means that we're talking about layer 2 solutions much more internally now, trying to see what are the other options. There are a few unanswered questions around composability, because for us that was very important. That whole concept behind money Legos, being able to stick things together. But if each one of those is on a different layer, then obviously you can't chain 10 of those within one single transaction. So then what? Should all these dApps congregate around one layer 2 solution? Which of the layer 2 ones are the most viable? So we're still in that exploration phase. I don't know when we'll see solutions, but we're on it as a team.
This is actually something I'd like to discuss a bit more on, and just hear everyone's kind of view or opinion, because I think everyone knows that gas is going to be more and more in demand, and there just really isn't a sort of a really clear solution on the sort of in the near term. How do you guys see this sort of playing out in the next like 6 months, 1 year? I mean, I guess hopefully in 2 years' time it won't be a problem anymore.
I think 2 years is
Too
a long
long.
time. 2 years is a long time to ask the community to wait. I think, I mean, to an extent, I think that it's kind of good that this has happened. I think back in 2017, 2018, there was a lot of hype around alternate layer ones, and I think it's really important that we actually do have legitimate alternate layer ones. I think Ethereum is really the only one that has seen a huge amount of traction with developers to date, or at least with the products that have been built on top of them. But I think that with this recent huge gas explosion, everyone has kind of started becoming re-interested in these projects, and a lot of them didn't go anywhere. They spent 2 years building. It takes a long time to build a proper layer one, and to get it right. And I think some protocols have gotten it right. I do think Polkadot is one of them. And this is going to help create a bit of competition in the space, which I think is always good. But also I think that interoperability plays a big part in this. Obviously, the more layer one chains there are, the more variety users have to pick. And I think that's always been a big part of decentralization, at least for me, has been not just the ability to be self-sovereign, but the ability to choose. You can choose whether you want to be self-sovereign, you can choose whether you want to vote, you can choose whether you want to delegate that vote, or you can choose whether you want to lock up your tokens in an exchange because they may be better at security than you are. But until recently, you haven't really had a choice about what chain you want to use, or which security model you think is really the best one. And you're kind of stuck with Ethereum if you really want to do anything interesting. And I think now that the pain of high gas prices and sort of the time delay between now and when ETH 2.0 might be out and actually solve the gas problem, is going to drive people to other chains. And now that we have real interoperability solutions out there, Cosmos obviously with its IBC, you've got Thorchain with their cross-chain Uniswap, you've got Ren with a sort of more generic capability. There are plenty of options for users to move between chains. And this is great for composability. You may not necessarily get the sort of a single atomic transaction that Dennis talked about, where everything happens across all chains all at once or not, but you can still create a cascade of consequences where you only have to take one action on one chain and it will flow through the other chains. They'll trigger an event which causes something to happen on another chain, which triggers an event which causes something to happen on another chain. So from the perspective of the user, they can still get a very composable experience, albeit the specifics of how we do that might be a little more janky.
When do you think we will be kind of when should we start seeing the first glimpses of stuff realistic stuff becoming usable and coming out on other layer twos? And I guess and what would be the first one essentially to realistically compete with Ethereum?
If I had to take a bet, I would say Polkadot, just because they're there with it, and their solution is not too dissimilar to ETH 2.0. So anyone who is okay with the ETH 2.0 proposal should be more or less okay with Polkadot's model, at least satisfied enough to use it before ETH 2.0 comes around. I think conservatively next year, we should be able to start seeing truly multi-chain apps where maybe a single application actually resides on multiple chains.
Got it. Exciting. JP, I remember you shared some opinions last time about Polkadot being a competitor or a realistic competitor to ETH. What are your thoughts on sort of what we discussed right now?
Yeah, so Polkadot and Cosmos are two networks and ecosystems that are competitive and getting traction, but with two different security models. So Cosmos is bring your own security. Polkadot is buy your security with the DOT token. It's mandatory. So we're yet to actually see what that means for network effects. I think Cosmos SDK is going to be a bit like Linux because it's free, open source, works great, used everywhere. ThorChain, Ran use it. Then the bet is, will all these chains start to use IBC to connect, and which will be the main hub that they go through? That's the only long-term plan for the Atom token to accrue value, being a IBC relayer between chains as the center hub. But if Ren is the most economically significant, or ThorChain is, then or Binance Chain is also a Cosmos-based chain, then that chain will be the hub, and that value accrual or relaying IBC packets will go to that chain instead. Whereas Polkadot is you buy DOT tokens in order to get your parachain to rent security. And so I think DOT has a much more convincing value retention because it's direct plan. What that means for scalability, I don't know yet. I do think that 1,000 Cosmos chains is more scalable than 1,000 parachains, if that's even possible, because they will naturally form the best graph possible to relay the IBC packets. Whereas Polkadot, I just don't see how that could work yet. So yeah, we'll see how we go. I wouldn't, the ThorChain team are obviously betting big on Cosmos because it's fit for purpose. They needed a state machine. Cosmos SDK works great as a state machine. To be seen.
What about Solana?
Yeah, so Project Serum is being a big project that everyone knows here probably, that's building on Solana. Solana use a very interesting proof of history. Essentially, it's recursive SHA-256 hashing, which is not parallelizable. So once you hash one bit of entropy, then you hash that, and you can only hash that in this long chain. So you can't parallelize it. So they think it's resistant to ASICs and things that befall ASIC mining. Although the limit is the limit to Solana's to prevent Solana becoming just a proof of work chain, which it could, is the idea that you can't parallelize it, and we're already at the kind of the point of diminishing returns of chip design. So that it's going to cost 20 billion to build a faster chip in order to do those computations. That will kind of prevent Solana becoming just an ASIC mined proof of work chain. But if proof of history does work and recursive SHA-256 mining does work, then Solana could be. It's a very unique model. There's no sharding. It's very, very unique. So you could potentially hedge.
They still have a PBFT based system built around it, though, don't they?
Yeah, they do need a verifiable delay function on chain. So that's the other thing that I'm a little bit dubious on. Verifiable delay functions. I'm just highly dubious that you can actually create intrinsic entropy using on-chain VDF that can't be gamed in a way. The biggest example of this to come is going to be the beacon chain on V2.0. We'll see if it works. So we'll see.
Dennis, how is this gas problem going to be solved?
Hopefully layer 2, and in 10 years time, ETH 2.0 phase 2 or whatever. Or I don't know, there's still like open questions around how we solve it and how we're all going to migrate to ETH 2.0 to fix the scaling, or it's hard to tell what the landscape will look like in a year or 2 years time. I mean, we're seeing some of the stuff offload off Ethereum onto OMG, for example, with Tether. So if the gas cost, if low value transactions can be moved to layer 2, and only the most high value ones will remain back on ETH. So we have almost like an execution layer with all these layer 2, and just the settlement happens on Ethereum. I mean, that could work as well, but it seems a bit clunky compared to what all these other projects are doing with cross-chain compatibility. But I'm not sure how it's going to play out in the next 6-12 months. I'm just hoping like whatever the path of least resistance is to lowering the transaction fees, that's what will happen.
I guess in some ways it has sort of forced everyone to think, more economically as well, right? But ultimately, the sort of the pushers of the gas prices have been basically, I think, once like the next version of YAM launches, it's again going to be gas to 400.
Yeah. I mean, that's what worried me about, this whole adoption thing we're talking about. If we onboarded another 100,000 people, it would clog up the system. We had crypto kitties from 2 years ago, and we barely moved since then. So I don't know how this plays out once Ethereum becomes more popular in the next bull market and more developers come in. That's why I see so many other competitors having a pretty decent chance of expanding the space in that direction.
Do you have a particular favorite layer 2 solution? Because there's now there's so many new coming out basically every week.
No, I mean, I haven't really dived deep enough into it to know like the nuances of all the different optimistic rollups and this and ZK snarks and everything. So, I mean, each one has great teams behind it. So I don't know. It's great that we're having like a dozen different things, and we'll see which one actually is efficient, effective enough, and has good product market fit to carry that banner.
Long, I think you being the only CTO here, what is your do you have a particular kind of preference on out of the, how many do we have, how many layer 2 solutions do we have sort of like coming out right now?
I would say my favorite at the moment is probably the ZK Star sort of direction. I think some combination between that and a rollup is likely to be able to alleviate some pain in the short term. I think mostly because it has.
Maybe you could explain a little bit into sort of to layman's terms what makes it stand out.
I think one of the things that makes it stand out is you don't necessarily have to have like an entirely new network that you need to worry about the security of the nodes. I mean, if you move your assets into a layer 2, you do have to worry about the security concerns of the layer 2 and the security concerns of the bridge between those two systems. There are a lot of different models that try and approach this in a different way. A ZK Stark I like because at the end of the day, it can just be run by one person, and you can just have one guy with a mega machine chunking through thousands of transactions per second, or the approximate equivalent of, and posting that data back on chain, and you can be damn sure that those calculations are correct. And then I think you can optimize between those moments where you actually need it at a precise moment to know that everything is correct, and in those gaps you can just be optimistic and just let them post hashes of what they claim the state is, and then at some point they prove it with the Stark. I've been chatting a lot with the Starkware team, and they have some really cool technology coming up very soon, I think, and I'm excited to see if and how that makes a difference.
Is high gas particularly relevant for Ren as well, like in terms of like the operation of Ren's essentially blockchain?
Not of Ren itself. So Ren takes the decision of not actually taking action on chains. It just authorizes the ability to take action on chains. It takes very few actions on chain itself. It does have an impact on us in the sense that when someone wants to move an asset from the Bitcoin chain to the Ethereum chain, they have to pay all of these associated fees. And of course, one of the fees is minting the tokenized representation. And if gas prices are 400 pop, then that's starting to look very expensive. And so what ends up happening is people move it in bulk, and then they keep it there on Ethereum, and they just let it sit there. And that's very dangerous for everyone, really. It's dangerous for RenVM because it's not generating fees. It's dangerous for Bitcoin because if you offload all of the Bitcoin from that network to Ethereum, then the Bitcoin chain has no opportunity to generate fees itself. And it's dangerous for Ethereum because if either of those two other networks collapse and you're using this Bitcoin as collateral in a liquidity pool or for DAI or whatever, then suddenly all of those dependent ecosystems collapse as well. So I think once interoperability comes into the picture, high gas prices can become a little bit of an issue, can sort of start becoming a security issue, not just a usability issue.
And I think Dennis mentioned that kind of this gas situation is becoming like an obstacle to essentially adoption. I remember myself as well, like a couple of weeks ago, and like Yam had just come out. I was trying to do something completely unrelated, but it's just Ethereum over a couple of days became this, like, it was literally the most expensive financial service I've ever used, which it doesn't feel like the future of money anymore. But like, what do you guys see as the kind of, when talking about DeFi, for example, what do you see as the sort of biggest risk right now? Would it be something like so smart contract risk obviously is something that I guess we are every day, as this TVL or volumes and all these metrics increase, we're reaching all-time highs of basically peak smart contract risk technically, or is it something around regulatory? Are they going to catch up with uniswapping sort of practices, or
humans love
what do you think, Lom?
Humans love one answer, but I think the reality is that it's a little bit of all of that, and those risks kind of aggregate together. The point you raise about sort of adoption is kind of interesting. Everyone that I have tried to onboard into the DeFi space, either successfully or not successfully, have not tripped up at the moment of interacting with Ethereum in terms of like using a wallet. It's been almost everything in the lead up to that. Like, how do they actually get a hold of their first crypto? How do you explain the concept of a wallet? A lot of it is actually the philosophical or sort of maybe like general education layer. We're kind of back in the days of trying to teach people that a computer is a thing and you can control it with this like mouse. We're at the sort of financial equivalent of that. I think that in itself is a huge risk to DeFi, not being able to actually accrue huge levels of liquidity and onboard all of this retail. Personally, I think that reputation plays a big part in all of this. And, I wasn't super stoked to see Yam come out. It was just a matter of time before something went wrong. And it was just basically, you weren't praying for something not to go wrong. You were praying for it to not go so badly wrong that everyone lost their money. And I think we're lucky as a community that it went the way that it did. And hopefully when it breaks next time, it's equally safe or equally okay.
Yeah, I don't know
What
where
are your,
this.
I guess maybe.
So I was just going to add, I don't know where this trend came for, like this craziness, where people just launch something and say, I haven't audited, no audits, but don't put your money in, knowing full well that $500 million is going to be locked in because people are so greedy and desperate for it. And then it does go down. Every time it keeps going down. And this is like, it's making me so uncomfortable. And
each time people think it's going to be different.
Sorry?
Each time people think it's going to be different, even though they're
Yeah.
saying
it's because it's honest because Andre Condé was, I test him prod, and he kind of set the example for everyone else to follow because, obviously successful at launching Yearn, and he's obviously a magician, but his tagline kind of gave the wrong kind of direction to other DeFiers that were following him, and no audits, just throw it out in production, and yeah.
I think the difference there was though that my impression of his approach was that he was ultimately building a tool that he wanted to use and other people could come and use it too if they wanted. Whereas the system with Yam was kind of like, we're going to build a system for other people, but we're going to tell them not to use it. Like,
yeah, that's true.
That's clearly not actually your
Didn't
intention.
they also dump tokens onto the users at some point?
I don't know or necessarily even care about that. I just think like the claim to say this is unaudited, don't use it, but it's an experiment, then who are you thinking is going to anticipate, like, is it going to partake in this experiment? It's got to be somebody, right? I think it's unauthentic to do it the way that it was done. But I think Andre does it in a much more authentic way.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not Andre's fault that the valuations are so out of whack. We're talking about valuations in the billions for a governance token. Like, how can that vote be worth? I think it's 99% speculation, less than 1% fundamental value being drive for the whole ecosystem. I don't know if you guys see more value in that. Maybe I'm missing it, but it just seems to
maybe
be a lot
more
of
than 1%, but certainly not in the billions yet.
Yeah, for unproven, unaudited, 1-month-old projects at the end of the day.
Who is creating fundamental value the most? You can't say Kyber. Do you think right now?
I haven't really thought about. I mean, okay, like projects like Maker who are providing actual service, like the lending, like the borrowing. Everyone's providing some kind of fundamental value at varying degrees. I think over longer times, that fundamental value is gradually growing up collectively as well, and network effects keep multiplying up. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to assign value to that fundamental value and say, oh, this one has the most fundamental value.
Got it. What do you think, Long?
Well, as opposed to right now, I don't know. I think a lot of valuations are super inflated. But I think in general, to be honest, still Coinbase and Binance, I think, have provided in aggregate the most value to this space so far. None of this ecosystem, DeFi, would exist without them, because they made it possible to actually get involved and to be liquid, and to not necessarily have to own your own crypto straight away, and still be involved in the system. And even if you do own your own crypto, until very recently, it was beyond the shadow of a doubt that the easiest place to be liquid was to at least temporarily move your tokens into the exchange and do your business there, and then move them back out. And it's such a fundamental value that they provide to the ecosystem in that sense.
Got it. And I think we mentioned that the sort of running out of time here, but my last question to all of you would be, we all agreed that valuations are out of whack. Everything's pretty crazy. What's different from 2017? Why is this time different? What do you think, Long?
There's at least some fundamental value here right now. There's real yield to be generated. At just using my own project as an example, Ren, its current valuations for its dark nodes are yielding them 4 to 5%, right? Of other tokens as well. As Dennis is saying, it's not just like a self-fulfilling value thing. It's they're getting Bitcoin and they're getting Zcash and they're getting Bitcoin Cash. These are real hard cryptocurrencies. That's not an out of whack valuation. It can get out of whack, certainly, but and if you were trying to account for some crazy future growth that you expect the project to have, then maybe the valuation could go higher. If you don't think it's going anywhere, maybe the valuation is fine or could go lower. But there is something there, and the same with Aave and Maker and Compound. There's a real value in being able to borrow and lend and leverage. And these kind of things they weren't really, or they had only just become a thing in 2017, or there were promises of a thing in 2017.
Because there was nothing usable in 2017, right? It was only, we're going to decentralize the dentist industry, right?
Yeah. But even the, few projects that were around, they didn't have anything to integrate with, right? So it's like, okay, you could borrow something. For what purpose could you borrow this thing? Now we've got enough projects that you can borrow something and move it into another place and generate yield.
Yeah, I mean,
Got it.
17 was pure hype, like as pure as it gets. Whereas now we do have like an infrastructure layer, like we do have like you guys, Thorchain, like Ren protocol. I don't know if it existed 3 years ago, but now it's so far down the development line. Then those tools have so much value for that next, like as a springboard to the next level of the massive developers coming in and building stuff and building liquidity pools and everything on top of that. I think that's one of the main differences between 3 years ago.
Yeah. 2017 was just pure hype. Whereas 2020, the infrastructure has been built out. You can lend, you can borrow, you can make yield. Cross-chain is around the corner. So you're not going to see that 2017 nonsense. You're going to see certain aspects are similar, but you're not going to see it to the same degree as 2017. The other thing as well is, we're barely even scratching the surface, 6 billion, and even that's 50% overcounted. So probably close to 3 billion total capital locked up in DeFi. And there's a pretty few protocols not counted like Kava, but that's 3 billion out of 300 billion, 1% of where we could go in terms of, and I'm certainly don't believe that the market cap's going to stay 300 billion for much longer. I think it could easily 10x over the next 2 years to 3 trillion even. So then the DeFi bubble, if there is, call that, will go from 3 billion locked to, who knows, 30 billion, 100 billion locked. When we get to those levels and 10 to 20% of the entire cap, then we're at, top of that bubble. but I still think that's the thing is there's inertia this time around. Last time there wasn't inertia. Money pumped into ICOs, founders dumped the ETH, away we went. But this time there's inertia. Money doesn't go directly to ICOs. The capital flow is into these lending pools and liquidity pools, liquidity tokens. Now it has inertia and now wants to stay. So it's not going to immediately get dropped like it was in 2017. So I think it's going to be a lot more sustainable. So the key metric I'd be watching is the total value locked compared with the rest of the market, and any signs of exhaustion, probably in the 18-month mark, with the wider market. So, and then even then, will it pop as hard as it did? Who knows? Depends on how high it goes. But I think this time around, you're not going to have like illiquid order books on Binance and BitMEX. You're going to have we're going to see $1 billion liquidity pool sometime soon. It's probably going to be on Curve Finance. And $1 billion in a liquidity pool to move the price by 10%, well, even Curve's liquidity amplification, take Uniswap. If there's $1 billion Uniswap liquidity pool, to move the price by 10% requires $100 million of on-chain capital to go in one direction. And you can't fake that. So as these liquidity pools grow and absorb this capital, it just means it's going to provide market inertia by the time for that bubble to pop. And I think we're going to be let down a lot more easier this time.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree that sort of this industry has never sort of been so exciting to be in. I know you guys are obviously super busy, so thank you so much for taking the time. Looking forward to hopefully doing this again, seeing where the things are around us and where you guys have gotten to. And thanks so much for your time again.
Thanks very much, guys.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Greetings, fanciful leaders of this world, and wannabe authorities of all stripes. You thought that you could just print infinite money, did you? Well, the decentralized world of cryptocurrencies is on the rise. It's only a matter of time before the intricate web of blockchain architecture and distributed governance enables so much financial and existential freedom that your model becomes obsolete. Good luck. Time is running out.
Hey, it's the Crypto Twins. I'm Litecoin Lucy. And I'm Tammy Tezos. Trading can be hard, but we're here to give you some important tips. The Bitcoin halving will always give you two. How do you think we got here?
Hi there, I'm Dr. Fauci Nakamoto. I'm here to tell you that if you're having green candle erectile dysfunction, just remember that ETH is money and market buy that
We have some breaking news. The Lightning Network, the Layer 2 scaling solution for Bitcoin proposed by Blockstream, is still just 18 months away. It's only been 18 months since their last vaporware announcement. Back to you.
Welcome back, everyone, to another university segment here at Reimagine 2020 V2. I'm your host, Roshan Marajkar. I'm the University Program Assistant Director here at Mousebelt, and I'm really excited to have some of our returning guests from the Midwest Blockchain Consortium. I'm going to have everyone go around and introduce themselves. Great to have you all here.
Great to be here. I can kick us off. Hello, everyone. My name is Ashton Barger. I am currently a recent graduate of Miami University of Ohio, where I was the past president of the club. Jack here is the new president. He'll intro himself soon, but I have recently started a job with a company called Red Ventures, where I'm doing some SEO, and so that's been very exciting. But on the blockchain side of things, co-founded a blockchain consultancy about 1.5 years ago with Jack, and so we've been doing some great development projects there. Currently operating as a CEO of that, and then obviously we're here today to talk about the Midwest Blockchain Consortium. Currently I'm heading it up as the president, so very excited to be talking about that today and going into our current and future initiatives.
All right, I'll go next. Thanks, Ashton. So my name is Alex Shaw. I'm a recent graduate and an employee of Marquette University. During my time as an undergrad, I started what was originally a blockchain club for just some people that were excited to chat about basically what shitcoin was going to go to the moon. And then after the correction in 2017 and a couple of successful conferences, most of our student engagement was gone, but we had tons of corporate engagement. So we spun up a consulting arm, and now that consulting arm lives on at Marquette, and Marquette's a member of the Midwest Blockchain Consortium.
Hey, thanks, Alec. Hello, everyone. My name is Zain Habib. Sorry, give me 1 second. Are we good? Yeah, my name is Zain Habib. I'm actually a senior at Indiana University studying finance and technology management. And so my story kind of goes back to sophomore year of college when me and a couple of friends of mine started Blockchain at IU, which is IU's first, blockchain student org. And we went through a very similar path that Alec did, where we spun up this amazing organization that had, I think, over 50 to 75 members until that 2017 correction, the big correction that kind of took people away, brought some new people in. It was a bit of a time for us. And so since then, we've been able to do a lot of things, like stand up an entire online course, which Mousebelt really helped us out with, and then going to conferences and attending hackathons and things like that. It's been really quite a wild ride. So this is MBC has been a huge next step for us, and for me personally, I'm director of corporate outreach there, and so we're excited to see where this goes next.
Awesome, Zane. Great to be on with you again, obviously. So hey everyone, my name is Adam Patel, and I'm the president and founder of blockchain at LUC, Loyola University Chicago's blockchain club. I actually worked on launching it with Gerardo, who he will intro himself soon. So I've been, working on blockchain at LUC for about 2 years now. I'm a third-year student, so my freshman year kind of went out, tried to get that thing launched. Very bureaucratic process, ended up launching last semester. And then right before our first event, everything went online. So we didn't get to launch last semester. So now we actually just had our organization fair just today. And we got, we're starting to get some members to be interested, and we're, slowly focusing on weathering this entire virtual world that we have to be in and kind of gaining as many members as we could. So Gerard and I have been working on that a lot. Other than leading the club and spreading awareness of blockchain technology, we partnered with MBC, Midwest Blockchain Consortium, and have been working with them and trying to get that off the ground. Other than that, studying computer science, I intern at Volt Capital, which is a venture fund, a crypto venture fund based out of San Fran, and we're making like early investments into a bunch of crypto startups. So that's been pretty cool lately.
I'll just jump in and go right here. Hi, I'm Jack Gilchrist. I'm the current president of the Miami University Blockchain Club. I'm in my 4th year studying computer science. Then a little bit more about me. As Ashton mentioned, I run Blocks Consulting with him as the Chief Technical Officer. And this summer had the very exciting opportunity to build a full-fledged decentralized application for a client. As for Miami University Blockchain Club, we've actually been really kind of seizing the opportunity of everything going online as a club based around online technology. It's really kind of been kind of fortuitous for us. We've been trying to target all of the infrastructure that students are using for online classes and kind of weaving our way into that, and just trying to present ourselves as a great opportunity for students who have no other options because they're stuck at home to get involved and advance their careers. So it's been going very well for us so far.
Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Gerardo. I'm a senior at Loyola University. I'm studying accounting and finance, and I am the treasurer at blockchain at LUC. Like Adam had mentioned before, we started this club right before COVID, so we're kind of just figuring out how we can reach out to students and see what their general interest is as far as blockchain goes and how we could draw them together so we could have this community at Loyola University Chicago, since we're the first club that deals with blockchain technology there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you all for giving kind of a blurb about what you all have been working on in your background. I've talked to many of you multiple times, and it's great to see that every time I talk to you all, you're working on some sort of new initiative or even teaching others, which is great. Before we get started into a lot of deeper dive into some interesting questions, Ashton, why don't you let everyone know what exactly the Midwest Blockchain Consortium is? And even from the time that I first knew about it, I know you all are working on some brand new initiatives and growing the organization.
Yes, for sure. Happy to do that. So we've kind of been talking about the Midwest Blockchain Consortium for a while now. We originally tried to do our first events back in the spring. Obviously, we kind of know how those times went. So we're originally kind of doing a pitch competition based around the Milwaukee Blockchain Conference that Alec was putting on up with Marquette there. And so, as that kind of derailed a little bit, we looked into what ways we could, shift online and shift kind of what we were focusing on. And that's kind of where we got some more ideas of putting a structure around this organization. And so, we've been meeting, we've been talking for a little over like a year now, really just figuring out, what's a really good structure for this? What are we going to focus on? Who are we going to partner with? Who are we going to really try to help? And so what we've kind of come together on is really, we want students to be able to find and get the jobs in the blockchain industry that they deserve, and really to help them fuel their career to get there while they're a student. And so some initiatives we're working on is trying to give entry level like consulting opportunities to really help them understand, but also help different companies understand what the technology is, and then give them projects to work around to really fuel their development with blockchain technology. Then through that, we're doing online events. The first one is going to be our second version of the virtual blockchain conference, and we're going to structure that a little bit more around recruiting as well. And so giving students the opportunity to connect with specific companies in the space and see what opportunities they can get there. And then from there, looking into furthering education initiatives, specifically around the Midwest, to help not only Midwest students, but Midwest companies to really understand blockchain and implement it into their different use cases.
Yeah, awesome. And I think it's really important work what you all are involved in. It's kind of like creating a hub, a resource hub, combining different organizations where people in your region can kind of go to you all to run events and work on interesting projects. So just an open-ended question for everyone to get an idea of, I know you all are kind of in the same region, but have you all experienced any differences depending on where you are as far as even the whole COVID situation? I know many of you are returning to school, so has your region kind of affected your work in blockchain or even in general? What are anyone's thoughts on this? Anyone can just jump in.
I can speak real fast. So we own a consulting practice at Marquette, although in order to feed our talent pipeline, we host a lot of in-person events, particularly around education, kind of networking, kind of social events, particularly just getting like-minded people in the same room to connect and collaborate, to start building exciting projects. And with COVID, that was ripped out from underneath us. So like March 15th or so, which was 2 days after I had to cancel the conference that we had worked on for months, which was super unfortunate. We had to rapidly pivot, and I grabbed some speakers that we were going to have at the conference, and then what we did was set up an 8-month webinar series, which at the time we thought was complete overkill. You know, like why on earth would we need to do 8 months of this? And in reality, you know, that kind of ended up being the right decision, as who knows how long this is going to last. So we're still able to engage with our customers and hopefully still provide students with great job opportunities in Milwaukee. But the way in which we engage with the corporates has been now completely virtual. So we're experimenting with like breakout rooms and all these different types of digital formats. And we actually tried a hybrid event last week, which turned out quite well. We did social distancing and all of that, but it wasn't quite the same. So we're willing to experiment, but we're almost all virtual now.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you guys see it as kind of like a positive sign. I think I've talked to many of you before, and you all have mentioned that you know, depending on which geographic region you're in, it's definitely a difference in the opportunities that are offered to you or even available to you. So what do you all think about that going forward? Like, do you think you'll just double down on like virtual events and keep doing this, let's say even after COVID, just because maybe it levels the playing field? I know many of you have kind of like spoke about these ideas before.
Yeah, I can speak on this a little bit. I don't know if we will go completely virtual after COVID. Like if the ability to be in person is there, I think that the prospect of having actual large events or hackathons in person, like Alex said, has a lot of value for actually building talent pipelines. But you know, given everyone is stuck online, we definitely have a lot of bandwidth to actually take advantage of that. And one thing that I've noticed in the past week, interacting with a lot of different professors, is that there seems to be a lot of pressure internally for these faculty members to themselves continue to look at how they can prepare students for this new post-COVID economy. And a lot of them are now much more open to the idea of working with distributed ledger technology. You know, it's not really because of any shift in the technology or sentiment regarding how it can be applied, rather just kind of almost a desperation for some sort of lifeline to grab onto. And that's been kind of a real turning point, it feels like. So.
Does anyone else have any interesting things just happening like on their campus or in their region that maybe you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I can speak to what our organization has done thus far. And it's been kind of interesting because we expected to not have as many kids come out to our booths at the career fair, the student organization fairs, and to our meetings. But we actually found the opposite happen. Maybe it's because COVID has forced people inside, and so they're looking for ways to explore, but we've gotten way more students than usual who are interested. And not even that, we actually held a discussion the other week, and there was a lot more participation, because I think that people are they're more comfortable behind a screen and in the chat function and stuff. So things like that were popping. People were putting into new ideas and collaborating and arguing, and so it made for a really nice thing. So I don't know if other people have seen that, or maybe that's just us, but it's been kind of a glimmering light in light of COVID.
Yeah, it's interesting to get your all's perspective, because you all are on the ground running your student orgs and kind of know the different environments. But even looking forward to the future, what are some of the future plans for the Midwest Blockchain Consortium? I know you all have done a ton of events in the past. You have some interesting initiatives planned, but why did you all decide to start a nonprofit or turn it into more so official nonprofit? And what's sort of been that journey for everyone involved?
Yeah, I can go for this one. So it's been really interesting, just going through the months trying to figure out the right structure for the organization. And I think it really just made sense at the end of the day that our number one focus should be around the students themselves, because I think each of our individual clubs could definitely integrate with the students at a ground level, but I think there's certain limitations that clubs have that having a nonprofit kind of bring it all together really would help out. And so specifically with that, it's the ability to put on larger scale events cross campus. And so something we really want to do is work together with students from different backgrounds, from different abilities, different skill sets. Because a lot of times you're limited at a club level, and sometimes you're limited with the amount of interest you have specifically at your school. But there's other schools out there, there's other students out there that want to get involved that just kind of need that push or that extra opportunity to kind of get involved. And so we kind of structured around a nonprofit because it really just at the end of the day kind of made sense for trying to help the students in general. I think there's a really great ability to do that, specifically with organizations and companies giving some of their extra money to a cause that really helps students to get into the job market. And hopefully we'll kind of get in this a little bit, but it's not the easiest thing coming out of school and trying to find a blockchain startup that you can really start to be involved with out of the gate. I definitely experienced this. I know Alec experienced this. There's definitely others out there, but specifically like in the Midwest, it's not easy to come by a lot of these opportunities. And so trying to really build up the students themselves and set them at a really like a higher bar, a higher level playing field with those of the coasts, for example, trying to really stand out as an organization, as members of the organization. I think it will help students get that extra opportunity and get that thing that they're really looking for out of school.
Yeah, I was really excited to hear that you all are putting an emphasis on, helping students get jobs, not only make them aware for prospective jobs, but also like really get them prepared with the new skills you need for this technology. Because I think a lot of it is at the university level, the universities are just not up to speed, and they haven't, there's not really good documentation out there at the university level, I think, on how to work with like open source technology or, all of these emerging technologies. So I know all of you run different student orgs, and some of you have graduated. Some of you are still helping to grow the orgs at your university. What do you all think is the barrier to adoption? You can kind of answer in the way of like maybe what you thought the barrier was first when you started your org, and maybe what you think it is now, or even like from the experience you all have going through starting the orgs at your university. I'm sure some of them there've been pushback. I know Adam always talks about that, some struggles there. So what do you all think is the barrier to adoption right now? And then like we can kind of talk about some of the activity in the space and like what you all think about DeFi in a bit, but wanted to get your thoughts on this first.
I mean, I can kind of start off. I've been saying it, and I'm gonna keep preaching it. I think they gotta fix this bureaucratic issue. You know, taking 3-4 semesters just to launch a club, just because it's about, you know, just because it's tied to Bitcoin, it's kind of ridiculous. You know, I was like literally told verbatim, if you start this club, do not shill Bitcoin at all because that thing is a scam, right? So I think once that narrative changes, you know, in the departments, at every single university, and it's slowly happening, you can tell, you know, as like mainstream, like these, you know, terms are starting to become a lot more normal. So I think we'll be there. I don't think people will go through the struggles that like we had to go through early on 2, 3, 4 years ago. But other than that, I think the other barrier to entry is all of a sudden crypto has gone from, oh, let's learn about Bitcoin to, if I want to learn what the newest DeFi token like YAM is or Wi-Fi, all of a sudden I need to learn about like decentralized exchanges. I need to learn how to do all these different swaps. And then above that, I need to learn what Ethereum is. And then before that, I need to learn what proof of stake is. But before that, I got to learn about what Bitcoin is and proof of work is, and then learn about what blockchain is. So all of a sudden now there's like an entire like cake and like all these layers that you have to dig through just to get to the top, like what everybody's talking about right now. Just to understand DeFi, you need to understand every single thing that led up to DeFi. And I think that is something that really scares people away, because everyone loves to make a quick buck. But then as soon as they see, oh, there's a million different things that I need to learn, it's like, nah, it's not worth it. It's not worth my time. And that's like the biggest barrier to this entire industry, I think. And I don't know if there's a solution to that.
I can add to that real fast. So I'm not going to speak to the university barriers. I'm just going to focus on kind of like the blockchain and the DeFi thing real fast. So I think we're in this like conundrum with open source development. And what I mean by that is, for example, like the Wi-Fi protocol, like it is an immaculate way to optimize yield if you trust the underlying protocols, right? So it actually takes out a lot of the complexity of having to understand the underlying dynamics. If you trust Aave, if you trust DYDX, if you trust Compound, in theory, you should trust the Wi-Fi token. You should trust the wire protocol. But the thing is, the only way that these decentralized open source projects get assets deposited or get users is if they're radically decentralized. So if they're representing similar things to like Bitcoin or Ethereum, yeah, sure, Ethereum had a pre-mine, but it was not significant. Wi-Fi was in theory, a fair distribution of the tokens. But once you do a fair distribution, there's no leader to set a vision for the project. And as a result, it's like, hey, we got our fair distribution. Everyone just hangs onto their token, hoping for it to increase in value, and no one actually builds anything. So it's like user experience is the hurdle, but because the community prefers decentralization, I don't know if we're going to fix the user experience hurdle. And the alternative is a centralized approach with a leader, with an elegant user experience, but you're sacrificing a degree of trust to interact with that. So I think it all stems back to user experience, and the reason that hasn't improved is a lack of leadership due to decentralization.
Yeah, that's a unique perspective, because I think everyone I mostly talk to always, you know, of course, education is a huge barrier, but I definitely think that the way some of these protocols are designed, they might even be intentionally designed for it to be difficult, if that makes sense. Like a lot of the value, I think sometimes is from maybe managing your own keys and different things like that. But then if the majority of the people, you know, if it just becomes unusable, I'm sure you all have tried to use these new decentralized finance protocols, and it literally looks like Windows 19, like whatever, right? So maybe that's where we are in the state of things. However, I think it's interesting that although the user interfaces haven't really progressed as far as maybe we'd like, it's like the underlying protocols, there is a lot of innovation happening there. I wanted to kind of segue into a question. Do you all think that the mergers and acquisitions happening in the space, or even when you see something like MicroStrategy purchasing $250 million of Bitcoin, because you all interact with a lot of enterprises, how does this kind of change any of your approaches? And do you think some of these mergers and acquisitions will actually lead to benefits for users? Or I'll leave you guys with this thought, right? Like I just heard that Consensus bought back Quorum from JP Morgan, but I also heard that JP Morgan invested in Consensus. So some interesting things happening in the industry world. Don't really know what's going on.
I could speak to the Consensus thing real fast, then I'll pass it off to someone else. I think that also is a leadership issue. So JP Morgan has a bunch of unbelievably talented and insightful analysts that are used to traditional finance. Now they're competing in an arena that is not familiar to their background. So what they did was they invested in Consensus, and then Consensus bought Quorum. So in reality, JP Morgan still owns Quorum through their stake in Consensus, but now Consensus leads the project. They have the correct leader, and JP Morgan is insightful enough to realize that they didn't have the technical competency or view of the future necessary to deliver such an innovative product. And they thought that Consensus did. So that's my opinion of the deal, but I'll pass it off to other people.
I mean, that is true, but do you think it's a problem that JP Morgan, because Consensus is one of the biggest, builders on the Ethereum platform, right? Because that's what they are. They're a venture studio on the Ethereum platform. So with that much sway, do you think JP Morgan making an investment into Consensus is going to be a problem going into the future?
Oh, like their
influence, right? Yeah, because that's ultimately what they're going to have, right? $50 million is going to buy you something, isn't it?
Well, my thought is, and I don't work at Consensus, but they're taking the bet that there's going to be a regulated happy medium for crypto. Like, they are the crypto bank type protocol. Sure, they have MetaMask, but they just switched that license from open to proprietary. So their future vision is not radically decentralized. It is a happy medium, I think. From what I've seen, it's like a happy medium amongst like crypto, bank, and traditional finance, but leveraging the back-end benefits of blockchain instead of this like no KYC version that I'm frankly stoked on.
Yeah, I actually think that there's going to be it's almost like a scramble for talent at the industry level. At the corporate level, it's like, we just heard of Blockfolio getting bought out for 150 million, and I remember Jack was saying, like, that's a project that anybody could build, right? It's just like a regular data aggregator platform. Anybody can build that, but it's the users that they have that's the value right there, right? And I think just moving forward, we'll begin to see a lot more acquisitions that aren't crypto native, so not a crypto company buying a crypto company. And I just think it's too big to fail at this point. I guess you can literally classify Bitcoin crypto as too big to fail.
I'm gonna save that quote from this talk because everyone always says like banks are too big to fail, and I think there's no reason why you couldn't apply similar ideology to crypto, because it is increasing in importance and maybe even reliance of where it's used in the world. Back to this acquisition talk, because I think that you all are going to have some different viewpoints here. What do you all think when you see an acquisition of a DeFi protocol or something being decentralized, but another company investing in it or acquiring in it? Like, what does that really mean? Do you think that going forward, even our whole theme right now is disrupting the system? Do you think that companies are taking the proper approach by acquiring a stake in the protocols, right? Like DeFi governance protocols. Everyone's been talking about this whole craze where you're not just owning tokens with the idea of appreciation, but you actually have ownership of a protocol. Like, you can decide the future votes and so on. But when you look at these acquisitions of like decentralized exchanges and these coins being launched, what is your reaction to that? You think it's similar to 2017, or you think this time is different and more? It is actually a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing what's happening right now. I think there needs to be a lot more auditing, and you know, things are being built in a day that don't even have the proper security.
I think it's literally worse than 2017. Like it's pretty bad. Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've heard like Vitalik himself say that liquidity mining is not a sustainable trend, but to the point of companies investing and holding parts or large parts specifically of protocols, I think that in and of itself is not only not a bad thing, but probably a good thing. These crypto projects like Ethereum and Bitcoin, and you know, you could go so far as to say just like normal open source stuff, Linux, for instance. The normally projects that don't have some sort of organized and centralized backing will eventually not have anyone to maintain that source code, and that becomes a huge problem for the users. So when you have an actual organization that is A, solely invested in making money, and B, the way it makes money is to keep this protocol running, that to a degree can guarantee that it will continue to run in the future. Now, obviously there are opportunities for the incentives to be corrupt, and I think that's the point of actually auditing all this different stuff. You know, that definitely needs to happen, but I think that companies entering by themselves is definitely something to kind of celebrate and encourage.
I'd like to point out real fast a difference between the 2017 ICO craze and this kind of like pump that's been happening because of DeFi. And the key difference is in 2017, people were dumping $50 million into a white paper. Today, people are dumping 50, 100, 500 million into a protocol that provides them immense value. If it didn't, they'd pull their capital out. I just see this radical difference in utility in 2020 versus 2017. These things are actually working like very well. So that's the difference that I see. I think it's a positive for the space just because these projects are actually working.
Yep, they're working till they don't. They're working till they don't, I guess. That's the idea here. I think a lot of these projects are interesting, providing value, and a lot of it is just at the experimentation level. And I'm really excited to see more of that, even at the university level with students, just like building more things out, trying more things out. I think the university environment provides a good sandbox where you can sort of mess up or you know, keep going. Whereas when after university you break into the industry, then things get serious, or they're supposed to get serious. To kind of close things out, you all can give your own thoughts, or you guys can discuss. Like our last conference was about kind of reimagining like how this year might go. We didn't really know at that point, you know, how long the whole COVID situation would last or what it would affect. I think now it's clear that it's actually affecting a lot of real world use cases. I wanted to ask you all, so since then, about 3 months ago, we've actually seen the failures of a lot of the current structures in our society, you know, be it money, you know, they're printing a lot of money, or even be it education, right? A lot of talk about, you know, if we can just have conversations like this, or you all are attending even virtual classes, what is the real value being provided, or does that need some level of disruption? So to kind of close things off, what are some use cases or even opportunities do you think that crypto or blockchain can bring to disrupting the system and actually changing even ever so slightly how things work? So basically, what use cases are you all interested in to close off? Can name like one or two that you think has the highest potential for, people basically using it, or something to convince people out there to use it, like to get away from traditional legacy systems, basically.
Yeah. So I think to the point of parts of our society failing, I don't think that blockchain or any sort of emerging technology for that matter can completely stop that in the face of some of the headwinds that we're currently dealing with. But one application that people aren't even really going to choose to use, but it's still going to pop up, would be the advent of FAA automation of how drones are moving through a blockchain registry to digitally identify all of these different, potentially hundreds of thousands, millions of drones that are flying all over these different corridors and cities and beyond to deliver packages or any other application. This is just going to kind of happen because corporations are looking to cut the amount of money they're spending on shipping. And blockchain is just going to run in the back end of that without kind of any sort of input from the user again. So when that happens and people kind of realize, oh, wait, I've been using blockchain in a kind of indirect way for the past year, that can definitely kind of shift public sentiment, I bet. Definitely a prediction though.
I'll comment real fast. I'm just extremely less bullish on the idea of distributed ledger tech than I used to be. I used to be super excited about healthcare solutions, key management type solutions, not just like private key management, but just like entering buildings, things like that, type of immutable proof that people were there type things. And I'm realizing now that at least my opinion has changed, that the type of security and decentralization necessary to call yourself a blockchain is probably only going to be applicable to monetary applications. And in light of that, the reality is today that price inflation is doubling. So now the Fed publicly stated for the first time ever, they're going to target 4% inflation for prices. And once you consider the money printing, which is currency inflation, we have an effective inflation rate of nearly 30%. So that means in 3 years, your buying power is cut in half. That is the biggest problem that anyone in college or freshly graduating is facing, but it's never talked about. And I truly don't see any other way to protect yourself against that risk due to the fact that the United States dollar is the global reserve currency. I don't know how else you can protect yourself besides buying a little bit of Bitcoin or capturing some insane return, maybe in DeFi. Maybe that's just for degenerates that like gambling. We don't know yet. But at the end of the day, I seriously haven't seen an application that could beat the inflation, the irresponsibility of the US government besides Bitcoin. So I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I'm stoked to see what happens with Ethereum, but yeah, that's just kind of my opinions changed a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with Alec. That's what I was going to mention. I think the hedge against inflation is probably the best use case, right? And I think that's like what a lot of people are going to be attracted to. You saw MicroStrategy, I think it was 250 million, right, into the reserve assets. And then soon after, I think like 2 or 3 other companies followed, putting like almost 30-40% of their reserve assets all into Bitcoin. So I think we'll see more and more of that. And, as there's this one little saying that goes on Twitter is when the music stops, there won't be enough chairs, only 21 million Bitcoin. So I think it's going to be interesting times coming.
Cool. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, I can kind of wrap us up here, kind of tie it back to MBC again. But yeah, something we're kind of really excited about moving forward is the ability to not only start to put on these virtual events again, obviously going for virtual blockchain conference round 2. We're expecting that to be bigger, better. It's going to be free. And then it's also going to be open to donations as well. And it's obviously going to support students So that's going to be really exciting. And that will probably be coming most likely in the winter or early next year. And then past that, we are, obviously looking to connect more with partners. And so specifically partners with us is someone that, one, really wants this, top level talent from these universities. We're currently partnered with 7, and we're looking to partner with even more in the Midwest. And so it's going to be a lot of, looking for what strategic university clubs or universities can we work with, can we get members from, and really continue to build them up. And then also working to, build out our advisory board as well. We're partnering with people like Global Blockchain Business Council as a strategic advisor. So that's definitely really exciting to kind of work through. And then, from there, it's, how can we build up these students with the events that we create? And so we're going to be looking for a lot of more, educational events and recruiting events from that. So yeah, really exciting and happy that, we're all kind of figuring out this structure together, and soon enough we'll be a 501c3 and we'll be off the races.
Yeah, that's really awesome to hear. Thank you all for taking the time to join us on this interview. I'm glad to have you all back as well from the Midwest Blockchain Consortium, and really excited to keep in touch with you and see where you guys are maybe at the next Reimagine conference. Thank you all, and enjoy tuning back in to another segment of Reimagine 2020. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Roshan.